you want to say about that bio that I read? I know you probably blushed a little bit, but man, you've accomplished a lot, man. And there's nobody more dialed into entrepreneurship as a founder and now as an investor than you. I don't know anyone.
Thanks. As you mentioned, Alan, I've been real fortunate, and I have had a few, a couple misses and a couple wins as a founder. I have had 400 million in exits. Last one being My Matrix. We sold a publicly traded Express Scripts for 250 million, and been able to parlay that into angel investing. And as you said, I've got over 100 angel investments, and really that's the reason I founded MacDonald Ventures. Is over those years of a couple decades now of experience that you get founding and running companies, I had a great opportunity to give back and really invest, to create an opportunity to invest in that next generation of phenomenal founders. And that's why I created MacDonald Ventures.
Steve, it's great. And right off the top, I want to just point out something that you shared with me on our podcast. Just right off the top, when you talk about your exits and the investments that you've made, people don't understand normally how long it takes to build a successfully exited company, right? A lot of people think in terms of 3 to 5 years. Could you just comment on that just quickly in terms of the foundational thinking and the type of timeframes it takes to build a great, valuable company?
Yeah, the last company I had was My Matrix, and I had that company for 16 years. And one of the things that I'm a big proponent of is mentor groups, where CEOs get together in a room and about once a month or so and share their struggles. And we all had a saying in there. It usually takes about 7 years before companies really hit escape velocity. Sometimes it's less than that, sometimes it's more than that, but typically it takes, what we see is it's around the 7-year mark where things really start clicking and everything really starts to come together.
Now, for sure, you share that just to to give encouragement to early stage founders now, but also to send a message to investors about the kind of patience that they need to have, right? That's kind of built into that message, but it is also worth saying that that doesn't mean that an early stage founder can have lackluster results for the first 3 or 4 years and think that's okay.
No, you can't. I mean, you still have to have a plan. You still have to be goal oriented, and you have to show meaningful results. The first couple of years, I find that there's a lot of personalities. Those are the personality struggles as you're trying to build the foundational aspects of the business, trying to understand your key performance indicators, trying to hone in your marketing and your messaging and your branding, corralling all of your employees, getting everybody aligned towards the mission, creating your values. All those things are important, and they just take time to germinate and really take hold in a company. And those are the things that create the foundation for success.
Right. So that's great. And I'm glad you just kind of laid that out there. I got to keep an eye on the chat box here and see if we, this is kind of, I think there's a Q&A. Let me jump over to this Q&A panel. I think, folks, if you want us to address a question, we'll try to keep an eye on this. I'm going to dive into the questions first, and then I'm going to keep an eye on this. When Steve's talking and answering my questions, I'll be scanning the Q&A chat box. I think that's a good strategy. So, Steve, let me throw this first question up if I could, right? Can you speak a little bit about a product company versus a services company? Let's take that one first. It's a two-parter, but let's take that first in terms of just from the essence, from an investor's perspective. And there's, by the way, it's worth saying there's two types of investors, right? There's kind of high return kind of investors that are looking for home runs or, kind of outsized returns, right? But then there's a lot of investors out there who are looking for, that are willing to have moderate, safer waters, moderate returns. And I think it correlates a little bit to this product versus services company, right?
I think that there's, I'd say that there's more than two type of investors. I think that there are as many type of investors as there are personalities. So, as a founding entrepreneur, I think that that's something that really is important when you're seeking a first group of investors, and making sure that the investors that you are pursuing or that are willing to invest are the ones that you kind of want going along with you on the ride. Because if they're impatient and they're really not even experienced in the world of early stage investing, you don't want to find yourself in a situation where all you're doing is trying to resolve investor issues when you're really trying to focus on building your company. So that's the first part of that. As far as product or services companies, I think, sometimes it's a very clear definition of a product. Like if I'm selling a glass, then that's obviously a product, right?
Yeah,
but if I'm selling a phone, it's a product, but it renders services.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's an app that people use. It's called Calm.com. It's a meditation app, right? So the app itself is the product, but it delivers a service daily. So each day that reaches out to you and it walks you through daily meditation. So, the line between product and service is really, it's really mixed, right? So it's not necessarily always a clear delineation.
Yeah.
When you're going into consumer products, I think, we see those ads on TV where, the guy's like building a boat out of some like Flex Seal thing or something. That's obviously a real product. Those are, for me personally, I don't really know that much about the consumer product space. So those are the kinds of investments that I would not make. But
Right.
There are investors out there that are, they've made their whole career based in the consumer products industry. And if that's where if that's what you're founding, then those should be the kind of investors that you should seek, because those are the ones that can add real value.
Right. And Steve, just on this product versus services thing, right? Like it's going to get into that second part of the question, scalability, right? In terms of product companies generally, whether it's a software product or a physical product, right? Generally have those scalability opportunities, but they often have more risk because of the amount of marketing and the amount of build and the amount of kind of consumer or even business to business tastes and preferences. Whereas a services company, like look at Tribridge locally, right? I think they got profitable within the first, couple months and never looked back. And, as a services company, you would argue that the risk should be lower because, you wouldn't step out there if you didn't have a service, B2B or B2C, that people already were willing to pay for. The problem with products, physical products and software products, is, trying to find your first customer. You can get that, and then you can get that scalability, whereas a services company can get those kind of profits, revenues early, but can't necessarily always get scalability.
Yeah, for me personally, I like the business to business services space, because if that's the kind of company that you're building, then you can build, fairly predictable revenue streams. You could build relationships with your customers. And it's just, for me, it's a more targeted approach that I could build and measure like my long-term value. And the consumer products, it's every single time you've got to reinvent the wheel. You've got to convince someone that this is the product for me. So, and then, with that, as an investor, when you look at those, because I don't know that much about that space, all I see is, wow, we got to spend a lot of money in advertising and marketing. And so those really, those founders that can do that without a huge investment in marketing, then they're the ones that, probably have something that's really worth buying and really worth selling.
Got it. So would you agree with the statement that generally the investors that get outside, really outsized returns, first of all, we know that they have a lot of misses and there's a lot of things that don't work, but the ones that actually catch kind of massive exits a lot of times are the products we think about, whether they're apps or physical or software, with B2B or B2C, like all that stuff. Whereas services company like TriBridge or any other services company that does very well, get the kind of size of exit can sometimes correlate between us. If you're investing in a pure services company versus a pure product company.
I would say that, as a founder, follow your dreams, follow your passion. So the idea, I wouldn't necessarily try to create a business because I think that that I'm going to have more opportunity with one group of investors or another.
Yeah.
I think that as a founder, you should pursue what you're passionate about, and then the money will come. But do what you love.
Right. Absolutely. So but then when you do and I agree with 1,000% with that. But then when you do step out to get in front of investors, it's good for you to know, the risk tolerance and also the ROI expectations of certain types of investors versus other investors that might have a lower risk tolerance, but are maybe willing to have a lesser ROI if the risk is lower.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're out and you're seeking a group of investors for your startup, most professional investors are going to have at least a website with their portfolio companies. And so I would urge everybody, before they're having those conversations with their potential investors, their understanding of the kinds of companies that they invest in, and determine if you fall into their sweet spot. If you are a consumer products company, you don't want to go to a group of investors who their entire portfolio are B2B enterprise sales companies.
Right.
So you've got to do your own due diligence, your own background, your own searches to find those investors that are aligned with what you're trying to pursue.
Perfect. Steve, we've got a question right here off the top that's been voted up to the top. So it came from Beth McLean, and I'm going to read it. Steve, are you interested in mostly tech startups, or are there other industries you're willing to invest in? Thanks for being here and for what you do.
Thanks. I try to stick with something that I know a little bit about, and so that's going to be technology-enabled companies. So the kinds of companies that I like to invest in are those companies where there is an opportunity to reduce phone calls, an opportunity to reduce paper, or opportunities to reduce labor, and using technology to accomplish those goals. So that's my sweet spot. And periodically I might take a gamble on something outside of that, but for the most part, that's my sweet spot.
Steve, are there any? I love these questions. It's from Chris Jamera. Are there any specific financial KPIs you immediately look for, or that are kind of important to you before you invest?
If you have sales, that's the best KPI.
Love it.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's the number one metric. Traction, and if you can measure traction in any meaningful way. The other, it's really, I think it's hard to just say what KPIs, because every business is going to be unique. Call center businesses are going to have number of calls. They're going to have on hold times, abandoned call rates, but that's not necessarily going to apply to a SaaS operating system, computer service or something. So you got to look at each business, and what I look for is that I look for founders that have it's more important that the founders know what they're supposed to measure, and that they actively pursue that as a business strategy. So I would say that would be a characteristic that excites me more than just the KPI itself. Okay, I like that. And see, that's a good little segue into this question at the bottom here. So what is scalability? How do you, a lot of people watching, we've got hundreds of people participating in Startup Week. I've got over 500 people registered just in the events I'm doing this week. So there's a lot of newbies and people very curious. This is Startup Week after all, very curious about how the startup world works. And this word scalability may not be familiar to a lot of people. If you don't mind taking a stab at it. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's probably in its most simplest form is that if you put one unit of something in, let it be it labor or something, that you are able to produce two out, right? Mm-hmm. If you're inputting one and you're generating half, that's not a scalable kind of business.
Yeah.
So, what you want to try to do, you use the key performance indicators, which, as I said, maybe it's phone calls, maybe it's error messages, if it's a computer software program, how many times the systems crash. There's net promoter scores. There's all kinds of different things that you can use to build your business. But at its core, you've got to have a very solid, measurable characteristics of your company, and like I said, key performance indicators that you can look to know that you're doing better or worse than the day before.
Yeah.
And you have to actively manage those. And then the next step in the process of the key performance indicator is developing what they call OKRs, which are objectives and key results.
Yeah.
And you take each one of those KPIs, and let's say your KPI is 100 phone calls per day. Well, my goal is going to be 120. So your KPI turned into an objective. I want to get that number to 120. And so that's how you build a scalable business, by translating those key performance indicators into objectives that increase the efficiency of your business over time. Awesome.
And so the scalability is something where it becomes progressively less expensive on a unit by unit basis to deliver what you're delivering to your end customer, right? There's lots of, that's one of the measures of scalability. And we love that, by the way. We love that from a business perspective. Investors love it because the more scalable it is, once you get into scalability, and software is kind of the ultimate scalable product in a way, right? You create it once and you sell it millions of times. Microsoft made that famous, that statement. But we like that because profits, if you can catch the wind just right with a very scalable product or a very scalable business model, and you can catch scalability, internet scale especially, the profits can be tremendously outsized, right? And that's,
yeah, those are the good ones, right? Those are the ones we really want to find.
Yeah, right. Guess you're gonna love this. So Hector Crespo says I was a pharmacy intern at My Matrix back in 2013. Now I am launching my own company in the next couple of months. How cool is that, man? How do you find top talent and hire your first employees? I would say, I don't know, co-founders. I don't know if he even had maybe co-founders in there, but he didn't. He said his first employees, top talent and first employees.
For me, fortunately, most of my first employees came through my personal network of people that I either worked with or knew, and they were referrals. Every single one of my early employees was somebody who was referred to me from. They were either someone I knew or they were referred to me from somebody else I had worked with.
Fantastic. Thank you for that question. And how cool is that? One of the interns from My Matrix is now launching his own company. That's incredible.
I know, it's great. We've got a couple of those here in Tampa.
Oh man. Yep. So this is how it's supposed to work, right?
That's how I started.
This is how it's supposed to work. This is how our ecosystem gets bigger and stronger. Entrepreneurs spawn more, investors spawn, that's why Austin and so many other cities have done well, right?
Yep.
It's great. Yep. So Steve, the importance of the founders. Can you overstate this enough? And their attributes of those founders, the mindset of those founders. And by the way, obviously people think it's all about experience and their skills, their hard skills and their experience, but I think you're going to tell us that's only less than half, maybe.
I think the first thing is going to be, persistence and drive, humility, those kinds of, the willingness to learn. Mm-hmm. Those are things that I look for in a founder. And, the question of, one or more founders, I do have a personal philosophy on, if you think about it, there are an infinite number of reasons why something doesn't happen. But there's really only one reason that something does happen. And that's because someone made it happen.
Wow. And
in the ideas of founders, co-founders, there's typically one person it's their idea, and they put people together and they recruit, their co-founders, right? And so it's awesome if you can recruit a group of people that are aligned with your vision, that are aligned with your mission, that you get along well with, and and that they are people that complement you. No one can do everything great, so you have to be able to align yourself and recruit some people that are gonna support your weak spots. And that's a really great founding team. And so as an investor, when you're looking at an opportunity for investment, I'm going to look at the founder and the co-founders and the founding team, and I'm going to assess whether or not I think that this group of people they have a good ability to support themselves. Now, having said that, I have made investments, and I've been, I've had founders and co-founders. Me personally, I didn't really work that great with co-founders. And one of my coaches.
Honesty, Steve, I love it. That's what we're all about. Let's do it.
When I was going through the process, I had a coach, one of my corporate coaches, who just said, hey, if you look at your track record, you haven't really done so great with co-founders. And my last company, I had the opportunity to buy my co-founder out. And, I was considering taking a round of outside venture capital or trying to raise the money myself and buy him out personally. And she really stepped in and saved the day and really pointed that out to me. So, everybody's different. Everybody's journey is different. But I think, I'm an investor in one that recently that the founder actually just left the company, kind of didn't want to do it anymore, and the co-founder is now running the company. So, every company's different.
So that actually gets to that second question a little bit. One founder or more than one founder, and I would even expand that to say a team. Your core team may not technically be founders or co-founders, but this idea of more than just one. Sometimes you see this single solo founder that seems to be doing everything, and the whole startup revolves around that founder. It's very common, right? You see this.
Yeah, I mean, you got the Elon Musk and Steve Jobs of the world, right? Everything revolves around them.
Well, I don't mean from an ego perspective. I mean, like you're starting, and there's no other people. There's nobody else in their team, their core team. It's just them, and that's a concern for an experienced investor, I would think.
Well, I think, yeah, that you got to be careful on that. Why is that founder? Do they find themselves in that situation? Mm-hmm. Is it because they're an ineffective leader? Mm-hmm. Is it because no one respects them because they, mm-hmm. and you do see that. And if you've got a team of people, and usually as a founder, it's really good as an investor, when you're considering making an investment, you really should meet the people around the founder or founders, because you get a real sense of, like, are these people excited to come to work every day?
Yeah.
Or are they scared?
Yeah.
Right. And so you see that, periodically. It's very quick. You can very quickly determine whether or not the founder, the CEO, is a great leader and people want to follow them and they'll follow them into battle, or or are they just yes people?
Yeah.
Right. You never want to make an investment in a company where you sit at a table and everyone is afraid to talk, and they all just look at the CEO and wait for the CEO to talk. Right. Because that is just a great indicator that, like, I'm never allowed to talk. Yep. My input doesn't matter. Yep. So those are not the kinds of companies that I like to invest in.
How did you deal with that? You mentioned earlier that you didn't have the best reputation working with the co-founders or so forth. And I know you had a strong vision. Most entrepreneurs are very strong-willed, strong-minded. How does a founder balance this thing you just described of being, collaborative team player versus being like so many founders that are successful or hard charging? Like, how do you strike that? How did you deal with that? Really
How
tough.
did I deal? How did I deal with exactly which part of that, Alan?
Just having to, as a founder, when you're small, the company is less than 10 people or whatever, dealing with, your own drive, right? What you want to get done, and trying to be, and also be collaborative as a team player in such a small environment like that. It's got to be a challenge for a lot of founders, because founders by nature, entrepreneurs, are already strong-willed, strong-headed people, right?
So, well, there's two parts of that. I think that the first part is that a co-founder can outlive their capabilities or their usefulness, and if that happens, part of the thing is when you set the company up originally, you should have, and fortunately with the most recent one that I was working with, you should have very clear buy-sell agreements that give people a way to get out of the company, that gives everybody a respectful way to leave a company so that people are not taken advantage of. But sometimes that doesn't happen. Even after, I got fired from the first company I started, right? So my co-founder fired me, and I had to go on and start do another company, and so the next one I didn't learn all my lessons, and we didn't have a strong buy-sell agreement, and I in my eyes, I worked very diligently to try to help my co-founder along and work towards a common and shared vision. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Yeah. Sometimes the background is it's just not going to work. And so in those situations, what I tried to do was just have a very clear set of expectations for everybody on your team. So like, this is just in general, you have to have a clear set of goals, and everybody with their functional responsibilities, whether you're the CIO, whether you're the director of operations, whether you're the head of sales, whether you're the chief financial officer, or whatever your position is, that's the role of the CEO to make sure that each functional person has clearly communicated goals and objectives. And then everyone in the organization should be held accountable to that.
Right.
And if a co-founder cannot meet the goals and objectives that have been set and agreed upon, consistently missing those, then that's an indication that this isn't working. And so at least it's not just about personality, it's that you have very clearly defined goals that the company needs in order to be successful are not being fulfilled.
I love it. And I would add to that, DISC profile, personality test type stuff would probably be smart also inside of an early team, I would imagine, right? Understanding the way, the personality profile works, so we know how to work with one another, because we all have our own mental frameworks and triggers and insecurities, right? And it's dangerous inside of a team. Here's a question that has been voted up a lot to the top here, Steve. And you know what? I always appreciate your honesty and transparency about your struggles. And you said you got fired. You've been always upfront and open about your own struggles as a founder, as you rose up to be a successful entrepreneur. And then you've also talked about failed investments. You threw that out on the opening, that you've had misses. So this seems to be the most popular question right now from Sam initiated. So can you tell us more about the failed investments? Anything that anything in common about that did not work? So anything in common in those failed investments? First thing that comes to mind, Steve.
Well, I had a company. It's actually still operating. It's a company called Mama Bear, which is a company that I co-founded, and we were just ahead of our time. I mean, as far as like it was a good product. It was a good service. It was basically a service where we helped parents keep track of their, keep their kids safe online by monitoring their Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah, and today that is a on point message and need in the world. Like that would really resonate today, I think, with everything that we have with our technology that we work from, right?
Right. And so we were a little bit ahead of our, well, one of the things that we did was location-based monitoring of your kid. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, there's a risk tolerance in products and stuff that sometimes it doesn't really matter. Like if you're using Uber and Uber tells you that you're across the street when they're trying to pick you up and mm-hmm. you're across the street from the car, like that's not a mission critical kind of function. But if my app is telling you that your kid just left the house at 2:00 in the morning because the technology doesn't work, like nobody's going to tolerate that. And so technically it was just a problem that we couldn't solve. So we could really never get ahead of the curve on that. The other, so that was a hard problem. And it was one of the reasons why the company never really took off. The other thing that we've had in the past is, and this is the common one, is that founders, including me, have tried to hire their way out of a bad situation. And the reality is, like, you just got to do the hard work sometimes, and trying to hire somebody to fix your own failings is usually not a great strategy.
Got it. So in terms of the failures on the investor side, it sounds like it's a product market fit. Timing was what I heard on the first example. Timing, and how big of a problem was it then, like versus what it is to, like that problem you described earlier. That's a big problem today, but in 2008 or whenever when that was going on 10 plus years ago, the problem hadn't caught up maybe to where everybody is now. It's an interest. Timing is a crazy thing, right? There's plenty of things that, and it sounds like that's been one of the challenges when you make a missed investment is the product market fit and the timing, and sometimes the team isn't quite in alignment. Sounds like that's a common description.
Yep. No, that's a great summary.
This next question I've got up here, so for you to invest, Steve, and I think you would speak for a lot of investors, how big do you need that market to be? And I know you can't put an exact number on this, and then how big of the problem? Just take your best stab at those two questions, if you don't mind.
Well, it's a friend of mine, Zach Coleus, who invests. He sums it up pretty well. He had an opportunity to invest in Uber when it was first starting, and the story he likes to tell is it just didn't make any sense to him, but if it hit, it's huge, right? Yeah. And so he and I both have other friends who did make that investment, and that $25,000 investment turned into a $150 million return, right? So sometimes, as an investor, if it's a really big opportunity, maybe it's worth throwing a little bit of money at it, because the outsized return that you're going to get on something like that is, it's outsized, right? So that's not, one of the companies that I'm involved with, it's called Software Automation. It's a company that we use robots to sew things with. Like jeans, T-shirts, etc. It's a very, very technically difficult problem to solve. But if we do it, literally every single piece of clothing on the planet is hand sewn.
Talk about scalability. This is a scalability play for sure.
Yeah, but from a technical standpoint, it's very hard to manufacture a T-shirt with a robot. Because the material is flimsy. It doesn't hold up well. It's not like a piece of steel. So it's really hard to get that right. But one of the reasons I'm involved in that is because it's a really, really big market. It's a really, really big problem. It's got, the tentacles on that. We've got slave labor that, in countries that we're assembling. So it's a big, environmentally, that creates a lot of waste. So it's a big problem. And it's an exciting opportunity to invest in a company like that. But, having said that, you can't, I'm not going to always swing for the fences. You really have to balance the portfolio with those companies that are solving a more real term, problem and need that have a pretty fairly predictable outcome, even if it's not going to be, a 200 times return, maybe it's a 10 times return, and, good founders, good problems, and a great way to make money.
Speaking of returns and X returns, this is the question we're gonna wrap up before I scrub the Q&A list before we wrap. But this question about an exit, right? So it's funny, you ask a founder about an exit, and most of them honestly will tell you that's not where they're focused, and it shouldn't be. They're trying to build a great company. But talk about, and by the way, I'll go ahead and define exit for everybody out there. It's usually when your company gets acquired, and the founders and investors get their return that we all talk about. Sometimes going in IPO, going public is another way, which is much less common, but becoming acquired is a typical quote exit for the founders and for the investors. And that's, again, investors invest so they can get the return one day. So talk about why anybody should be thinking about, or why founders should be thinking about the potential, or what an exit is and what it might be in their first couple years. Why is that even something they should be thinking about if we're not going to be 5 or 7 years away?
Well, I mean, I think you're always, as an investor, you really always should be thinking about, how do I monetize my investment, right? What's my timeline? And if the reality is there's lots of different kinds of investing. We have public markets investing. You can invest in real estate. You can invest in early stage companies. You can invest, there's different life cycles of a company even, right? So you can invest in a company that is just an idea, or you can invest in a company that is a couple years old, is getting some traction, and they need money to help accelerate their growth. They've kind of figured out their secret sauce, and they need money to scale that and grow it. And then there's, private companies that need an investment. And maybe they're like the 7-year mark investment, they're 10 years old. And these guys are looking to monetize. Like, those founders are looking to sell out part of their company. Those companies that are later stage, you're less likely to hit 100 times return on that, but your predictability of getting like a 20 or 30% return is compelling enough, and over a time period you can expect those companies to exit much sooner, right? So when you look at it from an IRR perspective, like, did I earn 20% a year, or did I earn 2,000% over 10 years? And whatever your style of investing is, those are the considerations you have to look at.
So Steve, for those founders out there, those early stage founders that are in their first year or two, or maybe even right when they're the first year or two, but maybe even before they've launched, what amount of mental energy should they give to where they could end up in an exit, even if it's 5 years away? Should they just not even think about that for a minute, or should they give some thought to an exit even in their first year, even when they're forming the company?
I think, first off, for the typical angel investor, it's important for the angel investor to invest in a smaller amount in a lot of little deals. And so really at each little deal or investment, you really shouldn't concern yourself that much with it, because what you're really looking for is a balanced portfolio that's going to generate a return over a period of time. Right. Then as you move up the food chain on the investing side, you have angels that throw a lot of money at a little bit of money at a lot of deals, and then you have another group of angels that typically these are people who've been doing this a while, and they kind of they made it they made it a career, and they're right. able to kind of look at these companies on an individual basis, and those people, because they're going to invest in fewer companies, are much more concerned with the timeliness of an exit. But I think at the end of the day, if you're concerned about exiting in 3 or 4 or 5 years, then you should go invest in something else.
Well, here's a different way I want to ask the question. If a founder, an early stage founder is in front of their very first angel investor, or they're meeting with angel investors, and the angel investor asks, hey, what does an exit potentially look like, in 5 to 7 years? Should a founder have an answer to that question from the angel investor, even if they're in the first year or so of their startup?
I think that, it's always a good idea to understand where you fit in the entire ecosystem of your industry. So you should have an idea that in an ideal outcome that these are the kinds of companies that would probably buy our company.
Yeah. Right.
I get a little nervous if the founder is very rigid in their in the expectation that they have for their exit. That's more, I think the founder should be able to answer that, but they should have some flexibility in it. They shouldn't say, well, we're going to go IPO in 6.5 years, because that's where, all these other and then you start listing out all the other companies that went public and their valuations. That for me that's scary talk. Yeah. Because we don't really know. Right. But it's always good to have an idea.
But it sounds like it's good for founders to kind of be thinking about where they may, who might acquire them one day, and also just the fact that they're building something that is feasibly acquirable, right? Like if you can't even imagine who would buy you and why, isn't that would be a bit of a red flag for an angel investor, right?
I think it should be a red flag for the founder.
Right. Exactly. So I think that's a good way. That's a good little spot to. So I think that's a really good spot for us to end. And we're coming up on the time, but I want to scan these Q&A. If anybody wants to vote up some of these questions, that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I'm not going to the bottom. I'm looking at the vote ups. So put your votes in now. The one that's sitting. Well, first of all, a couple of questions I saw here was people want to know if they can get in contact with you, and whether there was obviously some early stage founders on this call. There's no question. I would say there's probably a disproportionate number of early stage founders on this call that want to reach you. So what's going to be the easiest way for them to find you, Steve?
I think LinkedIn is probably going to be the best way to get a hold of me.
LinkedIn right now. And then your MacDonald Ventures is still a month or two or more from kind of putting a big splash of a website out there and the application process. That's a little ways away still, right?
Yep.
Okay. So if you guys can get to Steve, you'll be getting in, you'll be getting in early, which is pretty motivating. And someone said, do you accept pitches? And if yes, where? Beth, this is Beth McLean. She wants to know, do you accept pitches? And if yes, where?
Yes, I do accept pitches. We typically, we get lots of opportunities, right? I mean, we get lots of things. And so typically at this point, give us your deck, send me a link to your deck or something on LinkedIn. And, if it looks like it's something that fits our investment thesis, then, we'll go through it. We'll reach back out.
And Steve, I'm going to add something to this. I mean, that'll be even more true when you're fully launched, and there'll be an application process. But I wouldn't say something that's kind of obvious. I think you'll agree that the best way to reach someone like you, Steve, and this goes for all the angel investors I know, is through introduction. Through a mutual friend or referral. I mean, just unsolicited, cold stuff over the wall. Hard for you to take time to look at. But if somebody and respect says, "Hey, I know this company or this founder. I'd like you to take a look." Completely different. Am I right?
Yes. I mean, and that just goes back to life, right? You're gonna listen to people that that you respect. So, and that's something that entrepreneurs should do, is they should network to try to find their way to reach the people that they want to reach. When you get hundreds of people reaching out, it's kind of hard to weed through the noise to find all the good ones. So.
Yeah. Great. Well, Steve, thank you for doing this talk. This is great for Tampa Bay. I know you're a #1 Tampa Bay fan and resident, and what's really cool is you get to go out in the world and do all the international travel you do, and you invest with all the big dogs on the West Coast and all the cool things, and you get to always kind of represent Tampa Bay. So thank you for that.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks, Alan.
Right.
Go Bucs.
Yeah, go Buccaneers, right? Steve, have a good rest of your day, and I will see you again soon.
All right. Thanks, Alan.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.